Plyometric training, also known as jump training, is among the best ways to increase jump power and height for sports. Plyometric exercises are defined as such when a muscle exerts maximum force in a short time following an eccentric contraction. This type of training aims to improve power, which is comprised of force, or strength, multiplied by speed. When plyometrics training is used for athletes, it needs to be adjusted to meet the individual's needs. This is done by recreating sport-specific movements that are performed in that sport. For example, a lower body plyometrics may be utilised in the form of box jump to recreate a gymnast jumping or for a football goalkeeper jumping for a save. Although other forms of plyometrics exist, these include such things as sprinting over short distances or variations of jumps, hops and bounds. For whichever exercise is utilised, you'll be using the stretch shortening cycle. The stretch shortening cycle is an active eccentric contraction of a muscle, which is then followed by a rapid concentric contraction of a muscle. The increased force of the concentric contraction is caused by the stored elastic energy that is absorbed by the muscle fibres and tendons during the eccentric contraction. The stretch shortening cycle is made up of 3 different stages. The first is the eccentric contraction. In this stage, the muscles act like rubber bands, stretching under tension and storing elastic energy. It occurs when the proprioceptors signal the muscle to elicit a stretch reflex in an involuntary contraction. This causes them to stiffen and stretch the tendons as they eccentrically move, storing the elastic energy. The second phase is arguably the most important phase. It's the time between the eccentric contraction and the following concentric. In this stage, you must minimise the time spent between the first and last phases. This will create a more explosive and powerful concentric contraction. Because of this, we want to avoid the hips dropping below the knees during depth jumps. This exaggerated movement dissipates the stored elastic energies and results in smaller contraction in the final phase because it's having to perform without the aid of the stretch shortening cycle. The final phase is positive acceleration phase. This is where the muscle is able to concentrically contract with the additional stored force from the previous phases. The benefits of plyometric training include utilising a greater recruitment of fast-twitch muscle fibres, which create more fast and powerful contractions, and it increases the anaerobic threshold of the athlete. This allows them to perform more powerful movements for longer. The box jump shown here is a great exercise to use for increasing vertical jump height and control during landings. But when performing depth jump exercises, there are a lot of different coaching points that must be followed. Before performing the exercises, make sure that your eyes and head are looking at where you are trying to reach. This will help you land in a more stable position and help prevent slips. When the takeoff begins, make sure that you prepare for it by not lowering yourself anything below a half squat position. This can prevent the effect of the stretch shortening cycle and reduce power output. A good way to know when to stop is not to let your hips drop below the level of your knees. When taking off, be sure to be confident in jumping to avoid poor technique. The legs should be extending through the hips, knees and ankles at the same time. Standing closer to the box will allow you to jump more vertically, whereas it might be more difficult to jump distances if you're further away. Upon landing, both feet should land simultaneously, with the body no lower than the takeoff position. Again, try to minimise the time spent in this position by reducing the amount of flexion during landing. This will help to maintain power. Treat this landing like the box jump landing. Try to maintain power and minimise landing depth in preparation for another small jump at the end. Then, jump straight up, landing with slightly bent legs at the end, in a stable position. To know when it's time to progress, the athlete must be able to complete the progressed activity in a controlled manner, repeatedly being able to perform the technique without sacrificing the quality of the exercise. They must be able to land with both feet on the box or floor at the same time in the same position that they started at, which is with their hips above their knees. There are many progressions for the box jump. This can include jumping with weights, performing a single leg jump, adding more jumps into the exercise, or increasing the height, length, or speed of the jump. In the higher box jump shown here, the coaching points will be the same as the previous exercise's coaching points, although there will be more emphasis on making sure that you're jumping as close to the box as possible to ensure that there's no wasted energy in jumping forward. In the further double box jump progression, more control will be needed to ensure that you're ready to take off again. This particular progression will help athletes make multiple vertical jumps and aid in increasing the efficiency of the stretch shortening cycle. When the athlete begins making tuck jumps, as seen here, it could be a sign that they are reaching the end of their capabilities. Although, as long as they're landing above a half squat position, they can continue, but this will be when it's best advised for the athlete to rest. When plyometric training, athletes should be working at the intensity shown here. The rest time between each set is the required amount of time for the ATPPC energy system to resupply. Plyometric training should be performed no more than 3 times a week because of the intensity involved and the recovery necessary for it. This training can be beneficial in many functional and specific ways. It is the most useful for improving explosive power things such as increasing jump height. This is especially useful in gymnastics when the stretch shortening cycle must be utilised between multiple jumps to get as much power as possible.